My parents are a pair of wild, reckless lunatics. So before my grandfather passed away, he left all the company shares to me. However, I had no interest in running the business. I just wanted to lie down and collect money. But unexpectedly, after I spent half a year away, I came back home to find things had changed. My dad brought home a woman, claiming she was the daughter of his deceased first love and now his goddaughter. To top that off, my mom was even more adventurous. She brought back 2 illegitimate children all at once. This was my parents, 2 people in a business marriage who had been playing their own games ever since I was born. And they played their games very, very wildly. Both were talented in both offense and defense. I can't be bothered to care about how they play. After all, I was raised by my grandfather, and I had no emotional connection to them. But now, it was obvious they were after my money, and that's when my true nature might show. Chapter 1. My parents' marriage was a business arrangement. Something like a task. Having me was just another step in their plan. And then they continued playing their own games, both of them being versatile in their roles. Because of this, when my grandfather passed away, he didn't leave any of the shares to my unreliable father but instead left everything to me. I wasn't interested in business, so after establishing my authority in the boardroom, I handed over the company to the team to manage. Then I went out to enjoy life, and after half a year, I finally came back home. As soon as I walked through the door, I noticed the nanny's strange expression, as if she wanted to say something but was holding back. No need to ask, I already knew what was going on. My parents must be causing trouble again. I heard voices coming from the dining room, so I walked over, only to see 5 people seated around the table. Among them, 2 were my parents. My dad looked like a respectable gentleman, but in reality, he was quite the playboy. My mom appeared to be a refined lady, but she was also just as wild. Sitting beside my dad was a beautiful, pure-looking girl in her 20s. I didn't need an introduction to know who she was because her face was identical to my father's late first love. As for the 2 people beside my mom, both were in their early 20s, good-looking, and when they met my gaze, they shot me challenging looks. These 2 were probably my mom's illegitimate children. My mom said, "George, you're back. Quick, sit down and eat." She even stood up to pull out a chair for me. My dad snorted and said, "You've been gone for so long, and now you come back and don't even greet anyone. Did your grandfather teach you manners when you were young? Did you take me as food?" I replied. "I treated them like crap, and then you ate it." I sat down listlessly, and a nanny quickly brought over a basin for me to wash my hands. The next moment, a male voice said, "You sure are filial, talking to your father like that." The speaker was Makoto, the eldest of my mom's illegitimate sons. Reito sneered and said, "I heard you have hypermasculinity syndrome. Truly, a bad seed. You come home and immediately feed your father shit." I chuckled, thinking they were just repeating some fancy terms. I couldn't be bothered with them and instead turned my attention to my dad's first love's daughter. Maybe my gaze was too intense, as the pure-looking girl named Willow became a bit scared, lowering her head, unwilling to meet my eyes. My dad slammed the table angrily and shouted, "You're asking for it." But I suddenly smiled and asked, "Dad, are you sure Willow isn't your daughter?" He replied, "Of course not. She's the daughter of your Aunt Lou. After your Aunt Lou passed away and no one was there to look after her, I brought her back." My dad looked at me warily, as if I were about to devour Willow. I grinned and said, "Dad, you know, Aunt Lou was probably your biggest regret in life, but I think we can't carry the regrets of the previous generation onto ours. I think Willow's not bad. How about I take her as my wife?" As soon as I said this, my dad's face immediately turned ashen. Willow was so scared that her eyes turned red, and she was on the verge of tears. With a loud crash, Makoto suddenly slammed his bowl onto the table. Furious, he stood up and pointed at me, shouting, "George, are you looking for death? Do you know how long I've been chasing Willow?" Chapter 2. Well, this family was already chaotic enough, but now it was even worse. My mom's illegitimate son had set his sights on my dad's first love's daughter. And how dare this guy, Makoto, point fingers at me? I ignored him and turned to my mom, asking, "Aren't you going to manage your son?" "George, actually," my mom chuckled awkwardly, then put on a smile and said, "It was really Makoto who pursued Willow first, so don't cause any trouble. Okay, just do it for mom's sake, all right?" Reito stood up and said, "Mom, you don't need to lower yourself to him. When we were both away, he had the chance to act all high and mighty, but now that we're back, he'll have to lie low." Makoto chimed in, "Forget about Willow. Also, notify the company and arrange positions for the 2 of us. I'll take the role of general manager, and my brother can be the deputy." Upon hearing this, I raised an eyebrow, smiling as I nodded and said, "Sure, I'll arrange it." If it was just childish nonsense, I wouldn't bother. But now they were trying to get into the company. That was clearly an attempt to steal my money. Before my grandfather died, he grabbed my hand and said, "Make sure you keep the company in your hands, or else your heartless parents will abandon you." Using a typical cliché from novels, "You're touching my sore spot." "Fine, then, no more games," I said. "I'm going to my room to rest." I stood up, leaving behind those words. Hearing this, my parents seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, as if half the pressure was gone. But just then, Makoto suddenly spoke up. Did I fucking let you go? I turned around and asked, what's the matter? Do you still have something to say? Makoto angrily shouted, George, you're just a bad seed. You have hypermasculinity syndrome. Do you really think you can manage the company? You can't. But we, the brothers, are extremely capable. Hand the company over to us. Transfer the shares to us. I looked at my mom and asked, Mom, did you teach him that? My mom replied, George, please do me a favor. It's not easy for me either. She forced a bitter smile. It was obvious they had been pushing their luck because I had just said something. Now, they were getting bolder. I smiled and nodded, placing my hand on the table. If it's difficult, then don't bother. Saying that, I flipped the table over. The dishes and soup splashed all over them. In an instant, there were screams everywhere. The calmest person in the room was the housekeeper, who was used to it by now. People outside say I have hypermasculinity syndrome because my grandfather taught me that if I wasn't ruthless enough, my parents would eat me alive. That's why I often resort to violence. Over time, everyone started believing I really had hypermasculinity syndrome. Taking advantage of their stunned silence, I reached out. A housekeeper immediately stepped forward and handed me a frying pan. I grabbed it and, to their shock, charged forward. The first to react was Makoto, who also lunged at me. I swung the pan like I was playing tennis, hitting him square in the face. He let out a scream and fell backward, landing on the ground. After that, no one dared to move. I walked over, stepped on Makoto's face, and said, You keep saying I have hypermasculinity syndrome, so you should know how ruthless I can be. Since you know, how dare you provoke me? Did my slutty mother forget to give you a brain when she had you? Call the police. Reito immediately shouted. He hit someone. Call the police and arrest him. I replied, I hit him, not you. Why are you so upset, so eager to call the police? I looked over. Reito immediately stepped back in fear. My mom hurriedly said, George, they don't know any better. Don't argue with them. I asked, they don't know better, but what about you? You're over 50, and yet you're acting like a dog for them. Did you ask me before bringing your bastard children back here? You bring them back and then start arguing with me. Do you think I've stopped hitting you because I've become easygoing? My dad angrily scolded, George, she's your mother. How can you speak to her like that? Bang. I swung the frying pan again, and he expertly raised his hand to block it. His defense was so practiced it was almost painful to watch. He must be used to it. You. My dad was furious but didn't dare to continue. I sneered and said, Don't make me lose my temper. Chapter 3. I walked over to Willow, grabbed her chin, and said, You better behave too. Don't think I won't bully women. After saying that, I went back to my room. Once in my room, I immediately contacted my assistant to inquire about the company's situation. The assistant said there hadn't been any personnel changes recently. However, Willow had joined the company but was still in a basic position. As for Makoto and Reito, they had visited the company a few times with my mom, acting all high and mighty, but they hadn't been hired yet. The company was still running according to the strategy one set before leaving. The previous business operations were stable, and the new projects were progressing reasonably well. I let out a sigh of relief and asked about the shareholders' attitudes. These shareholders were all veterans of the company. After my grandfather's death, they had tried to sideline me. Some of them were restless, but I had suppressed them back then, though they still harbored ill intentions. Now that my parents had brought people along, they were clearly planning something, but the assistant said the board had been quiet, with no noticeable movements. No movement. That was the biggest movement of all. I didn't say anything more. After hanging up, I sent out a few more messages. Then, I made some calls to important business partners to keep up the relationships. This was the reason I didn't enjoy doing business. Too much scheming and plotting. It was tiring, and honestly, I was just lazy. By the time evening came, I ended up eating dinner in my room. With nothing to do, I decided to check the security cameras. Soon, I found the footage in the media room showing 3 people, Makoto and Reito, along with Willow. Makoto said, Willow, don't be scared. I can protect you. His face was bruised, but he spoke with confidence. Willow replied, What you do is your business. I'm different from you. You're here for the inheritance, but I'm here for revenge. I don't want a single cent of the inheritance. I just want George to die. After Willow coldly finished speaking, she stood up and left. Want me to die? Revenge. Do I have a grudge with her? And her attitude was totally different from the one she had at the dinner table. Interesting. I decided I'd see what she could do. Chapter 4. About 10 minutes later, Willow returned to her room. She locked the bedroom door, only to find me standing behind it. She jumped in shock. She almost screamed, but I covered her mouth. I squinted at her and asked, You want me dead? Revenge. Explain. What grudge do I have with you? Hearing this, Willow was so startled that she couldn't speak, but she was smart and had clearly realized that the house was full of surveillance cameras. I said, If you want to talk, just blink your eyes. Willow blinked. Wow, those big, clear eyes of hers were stunning when she blinked. I let go of her and walked over to the bed, sitting down and patting the bed, saying, "Come on, let's talk more comfortably." She twitched her lips but didn't get angry. Instead, she calmly said, "From your reaction, it doesn't seem like you're lying. So, you really don't know why I want you dead?" I replied, "No, I don't." I nodded. Willow nodded as well and said casually, "Then your dad lied to me. He said my mom's death was caused by you." I replied, "If I killed your mom, what would my motive be? Killing my dad's first love, what would I gain from that? Normally, it would be for my mom's revenge, right? But as you can see, not only do I not care about my dad, I don't have any feelings for my mom either, and you're not even my dad's daughter, so you're not a threat to me." I smiled and asked, "Then, who do you think benefits the most from your mom's death?" She thought for a moment before saying, "After my dad died, most of the family business was helped by your dad. Although the company shares are in my hands, many of the company's major projects are still controlled by your dad. That's why I was arranged to join your family's company. On the surface, it seems like an opportunity for revenge, but in reality, it's also about sidelining me." After this brief analysis, Willow's eyes were full of hatred, but she still said to me, "I'll investigate on my own." "I can't trust everything you say," I replied. "If you need help, just ask." I had achieved my goal, so I stood up and left. What a joke. A guy like my dad, who only moves when there's a profit. How could he risk bringing Willow home unless there was something in it for him? The next day, I arrived at the company early. Half an hour later, the board meeting began. The directors arrived one by one, all asking me how I had been spending my time during the past 6 months, and I just casually responded. Once everyone was here, the meeting officially began. I said, "For the second half of the year, I'm planning to launch a few new projects." I went straight to the point, but then, Chairman Lee, who had always been at odds with me, said, "George, you're the chairman, but you've often been absent from the company. That's irresponsible to the company and the shareholders." Chairman Law also nodded, saying, "Yes, George, if this continues, the company will run into problems under your leadership. You should step down and let your father take over." Chairman Lee raised his hand and said, "Those in favor, please raise your hand." It seemed like they had planned this in advance to remove me as chairman. Chairman Law also raised his hand, and several other directors, who were close to them, followed suit. The remaining ones, except for those who supported me, were just observing. At that moment, the door to the meeting room opened. My parents walked in, followed by Makoto, Reito, and Willow. Makoto's face had probably started to heal a bit, but it still looked swollen, like a pig's head. My dad sighed with frustration. "George, you're really not fit for this position. You weren't happy, so you beat your brother like this. If you lose your temper one day, will you start hitting our business partners?" My mom also nodded and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, as George's mother, I can responsibly say that he has hypermasculinity syndrome. He's cunning, brutal, and inhumane. He's not fit to hold this position." Makoto sobbed and said, "Yesterday, I just picked up some food in front of him, and he hit me. How can someone like him manage the company?" Reito pointed at Willow and said, "And after he got home, he immediately targeted Willow. If we hadn't stopped him, she might have been assaulted. Someone like him is a criminal. How could he manage the company?" Everyone looked at Willow. It seemed like, if Willow agreed, they were ready to vote me out of my position. Chapter 5. But the next second, Willow said, "He was just joking with me." Amidst the shocked gazes of everyone, Willow walked over to me, placed her right hand on my shoulder, and said, "Actually, I quite like him. He's tall and handsome." She then whispered, "At this moment, you should touch my hand to make it more real." I casually brushed her hand, and it truly looked like a loving gesture. She was smart. Helping me was, in fact, helping herself. My dad incredulously said, "Willow, do you know what you're doing?" "Falling in love," Willow said with a smile. Her actions were a slap to everyone's face, because all their previous accusations of me suddenly looked ridiculous. Willow continued, "And as for George hitting people, it was Makoto who provoked him first. It had nothing to do with the food." Makoto asked, "Willow, how can you help him? Did he threaten you?" Makoto was in agony, completely confused by what had just happened. But at that moment, Chairman Law still said, "It's widely known that George has hypermasculinity syndrome. A company can't be managed by someone who's mentally unstable. Let's vote." More people raised their hands. The overwhelming votes decided that I must step down. My dad adjusted his suit, walked over to me, and said with a cryptic expression, "Good son, you must know, the older ginger is the spicier. The winds have changed while you've been gone." He patted my shoulder and said, "Get up. This position is now mine." I grabbed his hand and, in the stunned gazes of everyone, I executed a shoulder throw. With a loud crash, my dad slammed onto the conference table, screaming in pain. The security guards at the door immediately locked it. Those who had raised their hands earlier all stared at me with fear in their eyes. I calmly sat back down, extending my hand to the ones who had voted against me, saying, "I remember who you are. Now, you have two choices: sell me your shares, or wait for your demise." George, don't go too far. This is a society based on the rule of law. Chairman Law and Chairman Lee, the leaders of the opposition, were furious. I sneered and said, "You're right. This is a society based on the rule of law, but I know exactly what filthy things you've done. The public doesn't know, but I've already investigated it all, especially the sons of some of you. I have evidence of their crimes, evidence that'll land them in prison for good." Their faces turned pale instantly. I continued, "As for your talk of removal, I veto that. Don't forget, I have veto power." Everyone was speechless. With that, I stood up, grabbed Willow's hand, and headed for the door, saying, "You've got half an hour to decide. Don't make me lose my patience." The conference room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Even my dad stopped groaning. Chapter 6. Back in my office, I poured Willow a cup of hot ginger tea. She sat on the couch, holding the tea, looking surprised as she said, "How did you know I got my period?" I replied, "I could smell the blood." I smirked. Willow froze for a moment, her face turning red, and then anger filled her eyes. I quickly explained, "I found out yesterday. The house is full of my people. When you ask the maid for sanitary pads, someone reported it to me." She said, "You're a pervert, reporting something like that." Willow glared at me. I looked at her seriously and said, "If you were my enemy, I'd have arranged for you to take some blood-stirring medicine during your period, and guarantee that you'd be sickly for a month." Her face went from red to pale, and fear filled her eyes as she looked at me. She said, "You're terrifying." Willow held the ginger tea but didn't dare to drink it. I smiled and said, "Go ahead and drink it. You're not my enemy." I sat beside her, smiling wryly, and said, "My parents have wanted to kill me since I was very young." She asked, "Why?" After all, tigers don't eat their own cubs, right? Willow was stunned. I said, "I was raised by my grandfather. I have no feelings for them. Actually, I didn't want to be raised by my grandfather, but they were too busy with their messes to take care of me." With no feelings, you can't control someone, and my grandfather made it clear that he wanted to leave the shares to me. So, if I die, those shares would go to my parents. I had to live with the constant fear of being killed by my parents, so I had to become the worst person just to survive. I smiled bitterly. Willow looked at me deeply and softly said, "Don't say any more. If you keep going, I'll start feeling maternal. You're even more pitiful than me. Although my mom and your dad had an affair, my parents do love me." I pouted and said, "Give me a hug." Then, I really leaned in. Willow quickly dodged, looking disgusted, and said, "Don't touch me." At that moment, someone knocked on the door. I returned to my desk and sat down. Willow went to open the door. It was, of course, the directors. Chairman Law stood at the front, giving me a vicious glare as he said, "George, the way you do things, you'll eventually pay the price." I smiled, pointed to the door, and said, "You should leave. I don't plan on buying back your shares. Instead, I'll make your family fall apart. You. Chairman Law stood there in shock. I waved my hand, signaling for my assistant to enter. Hand in Chairman Law's files, including his son's illegal drug activities. Got it. The assistant quickly turned and left. Chairman Law turned pale, cold sweat dripping from his forehead, and said, "George, don't do this. You can't go this far. I was wrong. Please give me a chance." I asked, "You know you were wrong." I sneered and said, "You didn't realize you were wrong. You realized you were done for, and I've made it clear to you. I wanted someone to be made an example of, and you stepped right up. I can't let your good intentions go to waste." Immediately, 2 bodyguards stepped forward and restrained Chairman Law. I said, "Keep an eye on him. He's a criminal. Don't let him escape." I waved my hand. Chapter 7. With Chairman Law as an example, the others became much more obedient. Not a single word of protest escaped their lips. After signing the contracts, they quickly left. I also pointed out a way for them to leave the city. 2 hours later, everything was taken care of. I leaned back in my chair and watched as a few more people walked in. It was my parents, along with Makoto and Reito. Everyone thought these two were enemies, but in reality, I knew that despite playing their own games, they were all part of the same profit-driven alliance. While my mom was fighting with my uncles and aunts over the family assets, my dad was the tip of the spear, and when my dad tried to snatch the shares from me, my mom was secretly assisting him. Makoto stared intently at Willow behind me and said, "Willow, why are you on his side? I don't understand. I've liked you for so long." Willow didn't respond, instead gently massaging my shoulders. We looked like a close couple. I glanced at Makoto, then turned to my mom and said, "This bastard you gave birth to is a total failure. Even at a time like this, he's still playing petty jealousy. Didn't you give him a brain when you had him?" My mom's face turned ashen, and she shot a fierce look at Makoto, saying, "Shut up." Makoto quickly shrank back, clearly intimidated by my mom. I lit a cigarette, took a slow drag, and said, "You've all seen what I can do, and it can be used on any of you at any time, so don't provoke me. This will be the gentlest time I deal with you." Makoto clearly wasn't satisfied, but Reito stopped him. My dad simply stopped talking. He pointed at Willow and cursed, "You ungrateful thing." But my mom's tone softened as she said, "George, we'll stop fighting. Once we sell off the assets we have, we'll leave." Good. I nodded. It seemed like the best option. However, over the next few days, my dad made his move. He didn't dare take action against me, but he started targeting the companies Willow owned. Several key businesses were now under his control, and it was clear he was going for the kill, but I wasn't idle. His resources were no match for mine. What seemed like small, subtle moves quickly pushed my dad out of the picture. He spent every day at home, his face dark and brooding. He didn't dare speak to me, but whenever he saw Willow, he couldn't help but hurl insults. Eventually, I simply kept Willow by my side, even bringing her to my room at night. I wasn't exactly a saint either, and within days, I had made Willow mine. The noise wasn't small, and soon, the whole family knew. As for Chairman Law, his whole family was investigated and taken away. The outside world was buzzing, saying that they'd all be facing serious charges. Later, I even discovered through the security footage that Makoto and Reito had tried to follow my lead, looking into whether I had committed any crimes. As for what I had done, the only things that could have involved the police were the times I hit my parents and Makoto. Such matters were just civil disputes, or even family issues, and couldn't affect me at all. When they tried to investigate, my mom intervened in time, stopping them from digging further. One night, when I returned home, I saw they had prepared a large meal. My mom said they were about to leave, and tonight would be their farewell. My dad had finally softened, saying he would leave too. Chapter 8. I sat at the dining table but didn't touch the food. It was clear, I didn't trust them, worried they might try to poison me. Willow, however, had prepared her own food. I ate only what she made, refusing to touch anything my parents prepared. As I ate, I noticed my parents, along with Makoto and Reito, were all looking at me with strange, almost smirking expressions. I immediately sensed something was off and looked at Willow with questioning eyes. Willow leaned back and coldly said, "George, you killed my mom. You really thought I didn't know? You think I'd fall for you with your hypermasculinity syndrome? I purposely got close to you to get my revenge today." I said, "What the?" Before I could finish my sentence, I passed out. When I woke up, I found myself lying in a hospital bed. My whole body was strapped down. My parents sat on either side of the bed. Near the window stood Makoto and Reito. My dad, still with that inscrutable expression, said, "Good son, I told you. The older Ginger is the spicier one. You didn't expect Willow to be my pawn, did you?" I asked, confused. What exactly is going on? How did I become the one who killed her mom? My dad sneered and said, "Of course, you didn't kill her. I was slowly poisoned." Makoto walked over and stood beside my dad obediently, saying, "George, are you still acting tough?" I demanded, "You're all in on this. Are you out of your mind? No matter what, I'm still your son. I'll be the one to take care of you in your old age. Makoto's not even your son. He's my mom's bastard. How can he take care of you?" My dad said, "You don't understand. Family ties aren't strong, but Willow's mom, though, is someone we all helped kill. We have each other's dirt, and that's the strongest alliance." My dad sneered again, "But you're right. You are my son. I won't let you die. I'll just keep you in this psychiatric hospital." I asked, "You all killed her together?" I furrowed my brow. My dad replied, "Yes. Makoto and Reito bought the poison. The channel was arranged by your mom, and I administered the poison. So, we're the strongest alliance. This is our token of loyalty." My mom said, "George, don't blame me for being cruel. After all, you weren't raised by us, and you have no feelings for us." She pretended to cry dramatically. My dad, a little too pleased with himself, said, "I'm the final winner. You lost. You were poisoned by Willow. We even have evidence of it. So, her assets will eventually be ours. And Makoto and Reito's father's assets are already in your mom's hands. In the end, everything your grandfather left to you will be ours." I shouted, "No way. The company's board will side with me." My dad laughed. "You're dreaming. Actually, Chairman Law said something right. You can't push things too far. Although you made an example of someone, scaring everyone, you've gone too far. Everyone's now on edge. So, as soon as there's a chance, they'll kick you out, and you'll end up in a psychiatric hospital. The outside world knows about your hypermasculinity syndrome. Oh, and by the way, it's your mom and I who spread the news about your condition. So, it's only natural for me to take over your shares and sit in the chairman's seat." After my dad finished speaking, he and the others left. Chapter 9. Within a few days, my dad and mom began consolidating resources. They merged Willow's company with the Law family's company. Then, they held a board meeting at the group. My dad sat in the coveted position, watching the board members below him with undisguised pride in his eyes. He stroked the armrest of the chair. This chair was left by my grandfather. The armrest had already developed a beautiful patina, and the redwood color looked especially nice. He laughed and said, "Hey, I've finally made it to this position." Sitting at the lower end, my mom said, "Everything depends on planning. Our crazy son only knows how to use violence." Makoto sat across from them and said, We should fire all the people George left behind as soon as possible. Reto nodded, saying, the core business and key clients are in their hands. We need to handle this properly. My dad, however, turned to the directors and said, now that everything is settled, does anyone have anything to say? At that moment, the door to the meeting room was pushed open. The person who entered left my dad and the others frozen in place. It was Chairman Law. He sat down in his designated seat and smiled, saying, that seat belongs to the chairman. Why are you sitting there? My dad was stunned, asking, aren't you supposed to be locked up? My mom furrowed her brows and said, Old Law, how did you get out? Chairman Law lit a cigarette, smiling faintly, and said, none of us have done anything illegal. How could we end up in prison? But you're right about one thing, everything depends on planning. But your plans were too amateurish. It's the little Wong that old Wong trained who's truly impressive. My dad asked, what do you mean? My dad was clearly panicking. At that moment, I walked into the room. Behind me were my assistant and Willow. My parents were completely stunned. My dad asked, how did you get out? He was shocked. I said, that mental hospital was something you prepared for me, and I've known about it for a long time. While I was away for that half year, my assistant already infiltrated the management of the mental hospital through threats and bribery. They've all become my people. I'm lazy and like to play, but I'm not actually suffering from hypermasculinity syndrome. My grandfather was a powerful figure. He taught me for many years. You thought I was a fool, but who's really the fool? The half year I was gone was also the most crucial half year for my setup. I sneered. 2 bodyguards rushed over, grabbed my dad, and tossed him aside. I sat down again, and Willow remained behind me, massaging my shoulders. I said, honestly, I could have dealt with you guys much sooner, even the day I returned, but I learned about Willow's situation, so I decided to investigate the truth. That's why it's dragged on until today. Thanks to your confessions back in the mental hospital, I've now gathered the evidence. At that moment, their faces turned pale. I continued, since the day I took office, Chairman Law has been at odds with me. I knew someone would oppose me, but why shouldn't that person be one of my own? I then pointed at my assistant and said, let me introduce you. This is David, the son of Law's uncle, who was kidnapped when he was young. My dad's face was filled with shock. You started planning this so early. My mom was too stunned to speak. Makoto and Reito looked as if they were in a daze. This was an advanced game, and they couldn't understand it. Chapter 10, I said. When I was 7, you suddenly took me to the amusement park, and I nearly got kidnapped by human traffickers. Luckily, Grandpa had sent someone to secretly protect me. When I was 10, you took me out to eat. The flowers garnishing the dish were walnut shells, which were poisonous, so I accidentally knocked that plate over. When I was 13, during Grandpa's birthday party, a hunting dog suddenly rushed in and attacked me. I dodged and choked it to death. When I was 18, while I was taking my driving test, a truck crashed into me. If I hadn't jumped out of the car quickly, I would have died. From childhood to now, you've tried to kill me multiple times. If I didn't plan ahead, I'd be a real fool. I listed all their actions. I don't know what you're talking about. My dad directly denied it, though his face looked especially grim. My mom, crying, said, George, I gave birth to you. How could I hurt you? I casually replied, every action leaves a trace. You think you handled it well, but I've been persistent and already have the evidence. Their faces turned even paler. Then, I suddenly looked at my mom and said, you and Dad secretly had a son, 3 years younger than me. You think you could fool Makoto and Reito, but you think you can fool me? At that moment, my parents started trembling in fear. My mom cried, George, you can't do anything to your brother. He's your real brother. She even kneeled before me. My dad softened as well. He pleaded, we won't fight anymore. We're really not going to fight. Please, spare my son. I sighed. I'm also your son. I smiled bitterly. Having parents is like having no parents at all. In fact, it's even more dangerous. It's so painful. Makoto and Reito's faces changed too. Makoto shouted, Mom, so you've been using us all along? Reito gritted his teeth and said, how could we help you? And yet you're betraying us. Look at that, dogs fighting dogs now. At this moment, Willow suddenly spoke up. I've played along with your little act, but now it's time for you to accept the consequences. That day in the office, my dad had intentionally scolded Willow for being ungrateful, because he had no idea that Willow and I had already talked in the bedroom that day. So, my dad wanted to make me believe he had given up on Willow. The later move on Willow's company was just for show, all for the benefit of the confession when they got cocky at the mental hospital. I paused, then continued. Oh, by the way, your son, my brother, is already dead. But don't misunderstand, I didn't do it. You spoiled him. He dared to provoke local gangs overseas and beaten into a hornet's nest. After I said this, my mom fainted, and my dad started crying. Not long after, they were taken away by the police. I had prepared very detailed evidence, and their guilt was undeniable. It was highly likely they would be sentenced to death. 3 weeks later, I got a call. My parents wanted to see me. I went. They were already looking haggard, but when they saw me, Their eyes were still full of hatred. Why don't you just die? That was the first thing my mom said when she saw me. My dad, gritting his teeth, said, "You're such an ingrate. We gave you life, but you won't listen to us. Why don't you just die?" I smiled and said, "Because I'm going to kill you both." Inside, there were no waves. They tried to kill me so many times, but never once did they succeed in breaking me. So why would I let their words hurt me now? And before they died, they wanted to see me one last time. Not to say anything emotional, but to leave me with some psychological scars. It's like those people who love to say insults like, "Your mom doesn't love you, but do I care? Grandpa loved me, and that's enough, and I am the worst one, or else I wouldn't have survived." I quietly whispered to them, "Actually, your son didn't die. I was just lying to you, and I won't let him die. I'll find him and keep him alive, torturing him forever." Ha 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 ha. Ah, my mom screamed. My dad roared, "You can't do this." I laughed. "Hey, I am doing it. What are you going to do about it?" I laughed and stood up, but that so-called brother really did die, and it had nothing to do with me. He got himself killed, but I love messing with them. After all, I'm a super bad guy. Later on, Willow and I got married. She stayed by my side every day, but didn't interfere with the business. Only when female clients appeared would she push me aside. In the end, once everything was on track, we became absentee owners and traveled everywhere.